What if Monkey D. Luffy, the rubber-boned incarnation of the Sun God Nika himself, had awakened Gear 5 at Marineford? Would the Marines have survived it? Would Ace still be alive right now? And most importantly, what would happen to the entire storyline if the war at the top of the world ended completely differently? I found 3 interesting ways this plays out, and it keeps getting better each time. In the first scenario, Luffy tears through Impel Down, reaches Marineford, and everything runs exactly on schedule right up until Aokiji drives a nice spear right through him, and Kiyabu follows up with a kick at the speed of light. In the original story, that's where Luffy collapses. Marco saves him, the desperate scramble continues, but in this version, Marco is too far away. Nobody's coming, and what happens next is something the Marines spent their entire careers training to never see. The drums start. White smoke pours off Luffy's body. A raw burst of Conqueror's Haki, completely uncontrolled, drops an entire flank of Marines where they stand without Luffy lifting a finger. And then, in the middle of the most heavily fortified military fortress in the world, surrounded by 3 admirals, a fleet admiral, a hero of the Marines, and 7 warlords, Monkey D. Luffy stands up smiling. His hair goes white, his clothes go white, the ground under his feet stretches and warps like it remembered gravity was optional. Whitebeard sees it from across the battlefield and goes completely still. He already knew the prophecy. He already told Sengoku that one man would come to bear the weight of all these generations and challenge this world. And watching Luffy absorb what should have been a death sentence and come back wearing the face of someone genuinely having the time of their life, Whitebeard understands that everything Roger told him at Laugh Tale was real. He doesn't order his commanders to protect Luffy, he orders them to get out of his way. What Gear 5 does to Marineford is almost too absurd to describe. Aokiji attacks again with the nice blade. It becomes rubber on contact. The rebound sends him skidding 40 meters across the plaza. Kiyabu fires a concentrated light beam straight at Luffy's chest. Luffy stretches around it, grabs it, and redirects it hard enough to shatter the execution scaffold. The entire plaza is already changing, the stone warping and bouncing, the geometry of the battlefield quietly rearranging itself because the Sun God has decided his physics apply here now. And then, Luffy walks toward the platform. Garp steps in front of him. Garp, the man who cornered Roger, the hero of the Marines, the fist that defined an entire era of the Grand Line. He stands between Luffy and Ace. He doesn't move, not because he can stop this. He can't. Nobody on that island can stop this version of Luffy. He doesn't move because for the first time in his entire career, Monkey D. Garp looks at his grandson and finds he has absolutely nothing to say. Luffy grins at him and goes around. Sengoku transforms into his Daibutsu form and the golden shockwaves start rolling across the plaza. Luffy catches them. He physically catches the shockwaves, stretches them between his hands like a rubber band, and fires them straight back. The fleet admiral stumbles, the man who architected the entire war stumbles, and every Marine watching it happen feels something go out of them that training will not put back. Galdino hands over the wax key. Luffy pops Ace's cuffs off, and for one complete surreal suspended moment, the entire war stops. Not because anyone called it, because every single person on that battlefield is frozen, staring at 2 brothers standing in the middle of Marineford while one of them radiates the energy of a living sun and grins like he just won a bet against the universe. Sengoku makes the call. The war is over. Not out of mercy, but because he knows an unstable, newly awakened Nika riled up any further will bring the whole island down, and the casualties won't be worth it. Ace lives. Whitebeard lives. Shanks turns his ship around somewhere at sea because by the time he'd arrive, there's nothing left for him to do. But here's where this scenario gets genuinely complicated. Blackbeard never gets Whitebeard's fruit. He never takes the territories. The power vacuum that completely reshaped the new world and made the 2-year time skip feel so urgent simply doesn't exist. The Yonko balance holds, and the world government, having just watched live footage of a teenager walk through their entire command structure like it was a corridor, starts making very different, very frightened plans. The downstream effects of this are enormous. Some of it's good, A lot of it's not, but we'll get there. In the second scenario, the awakening happens exactly the same way. Ace gets freed, the war ends, but this version forces us to sit with a question the first scenario breezes past. What happens immediately after? Luffy at this point in the story has no real hockey training. Gear 5 is real and it's devastating, but it's running on a body that survived Magellan's full venom, fought through every level of Impel Down, and has been operating on nothing but tension hormones and raw grief for days. The drums of liberation are beating, but the instrument is held together with emotional thread and very little else. The moment the fight is over and the adrenaline drops, Gear 5 shuts off, and everything it was covering up arrives at once. Luffy hits the ground and doesn't get up for 2 weeks. The Whitebeard pirates pull him out, Jinbei keeps him alive, but here's the part that quietly breaks the whole timeline. Luffy never reaches Amazon Lily. He never meets Rayleigh. That 2-year stretch on a quiet island where the man who sailed with the Pirate King taught Luffy the entire foundation of hockey from the ground up with nothing but time and focus simply doesn't happen. Whitebeard, indebted and impressed, offers to shelter Luffy, train him through his commanders, and use his network to get a message to the Straw Hats for the 2-year reunion. It's a generous offer. It works logistically, but hockey development under Whitebeard's commanders, as elite as they are, is not the same thing as Rayleigh. Not even close. The fundamentals that the original Luffy drilled into his bones on Ruskaina Island, the control that made everything at Fishman Island and Punk Hazard and Dressrosa and Wano possible, are shakier here. The ceiling is lower, the gaps show up exactly when they can't afford to. And Punk Hazard doesn't happen, which means no Law, no Momo, no Kinemon, and none of the groundwork that made the liberation of Wano possible in the first place. By the time the Straw Hats reach Wano, they're arriving blind. The emotional infrastructure that made the original victory feel like something earned is just gone. Luffy's stronger in raw terms, but Wano was never a fight that raw strength alone could win. The raid on Onigashima needed people who had been suffering long enough to be ready to burn the world down when the moment came. Without that, the raid is messier, costlier, and the morning after feels less like liberation and more like a city that survived something it hasn't processed yet. Saving the right person at the right moment doesn't automatically save everything that was supposed to come after. That's the lesson sitting at the bottom of this one. The third scenario is one nobody wants to think about too hard, and it starts with a simple observation. Gear 5 Luffy at Marineford doesn't just end the war, he ends it so completely, so visibly, so publicly that the entire world watches it happen in real time. Every newspaper, every Den Mushi broadcast, every person from the East Blue to the farthest reach of the New World sees a teenage boy walk through the fully assembled military power of the world government and unshackle his brother. The 5 elders don't have a plan for this. They have 800 years of infrastructure built around one central assumption, that Nika stays a myth, the Void Sentry stays buried, and Joy Boy stays a story that nobody alive has witnessed with their own eyes. The entire architecture of the world government, the celestial dragons, the warlord system, the buster calls, all of it rests on the population of the world believing that the current order is permanent and unchangeable. And then, Monkey D. Luffy puts on a white afro and dismantles that assumption. The Gorosei mobilize within hours because what just happened at Marineford is not a pirate victory. It's a theological crisis. It's the exact scenario the world government spent nearly a millennium making structurally impossible, and it just happened in front of a global audience. From this point on, every arc is running under a fundamentally different pressure. The world government is not managing Luffy. They're terrified of him. Admirals get deployed earlier. CP0 becomes aggressive years ahead of schedule. The Gorosei start moving personally well before Egghead because they can't afford to give Luffy the time the original timeline gave him. The careful, gradual escalation that let the Straw Hats grow into each challenge, that let the crew develop and the alliances form and the pieces come together, collapses. Everything accelerates. And here's the cruelest part of all this. The version of Luffy who wins biggest at Marineford is also the version who most endangers everyone around him. Not because he gets weaker, because the enemy gets smarter, faster, and more desperate. And a desperate world government with 8 centuries of buried secrets and zero tolerance for a second public miracle is a completely different monster than the one the original Luffy spent 2 years quietly preparing to face. Joy Boy was never supposed to arrive early. He was supposed to arrive when the alliances were built, when enough people across the world had been given enough reason to stand up and fight alongside him, when the truth was already surfacing and all he had to do was light the match. The Luffy who shows up too soon and wins too loudly doesn't inspire that world. He panics the people controlling it before it's ready. Enforced liberation in One Piece has never once lasted. Now a stronger Luffy needs a stronger team. But have you ever wondered why Luffy never taught the Straw Hats hockey? Hit that subscribe button to find out.